Jackie, are we ready to go? Excellent. We'll start with a call to order for the meeting and do a roll call. Jane?
Here.
Bren?
Here.
Jeannie?
Here.
Brian?
Here.
Larry?
Here.
Stacy?
Here.
All right, we're all here and accounted for. Mike, was the meeting properly noticed?
The meeting was properly noticed.
Let's adopt the agenda then.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. 7-0. We'll stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Well, we're going to only sit down for just a moment because our first business item is to run downstairs to the auditorium lobby and get a demonstration from our robotics team. So if you would, join me downstairs. Appreciate it. For all of those of you watching online, we'll be back. Next up, Marika's here to give us a presentation on the Booster Club end-of-year update.
I'm Marika Westerman, president of the Booster Club, and I joined in 2019 as vice president and took over the following year as president, which was a slightly challenging year to take over, but it all worked out okay. I'd say this year was probably our most normal year since I've been on the board. And obviously a super exciting year for Pewaukee. We had kind of a board member transition, so we didn't get to have a fundraiser, like our big fundraising event. We were trying to do it every other year. We hadn't got to have one for a few years. So I'm looking forward to having another event coming up this year, October 22nd at the Yacht Club. Some of our other revenue sources are listed here. These are the net amounts. In terms of spiritware, we do have around 30,000 in inventory. So that number's not, quite exactly accurate. We did order 5,000 for the youth night or the hoops night that didn't happen. So we have that will sell at the back to school fundraiser and the ice cream social. And then these are just a few of our other fundraising sources. We tried to do an unfundraiser this year, like kind of a direct ask, and people didn't get that excited about it. So I think they seem to like the event and some of our other things better. We gave out a lot of money this year, so it was really exciting, and I'm just going to leave this up for a little bit just so everyone can take a look at it. We really supported athletics across the board. I feel like, really proud of what we were able to give back. Obviously, a lot of hotel rooms and coach buses for all of our state appearances, but we also did, gave track jackets to all of JV and varsity, which was great. We had gave basketball bags to all 3 basketball programs, soccer bags, so lots of great stuff there. And then in terms of the clubs, we also supported FBLA in 2 of their conferences, culinary, mountain biking, and then Science Olympiad. And here's some of our other giving. Really what we do is we look to the school to say this is where we need your support, and then those grants are approved, and that's kind of where our giving is directed from. So in summary, we've given out more than we ever have over the last 5 years. 96,000 this year in concessions and discretionary grants. So a little bit challenging without a large fundraiser. We're still in just fine shape, but I'll be excited to get some fundraising going in the fall. Of our 64,000 we gave out in grants, almost 34,000 in hotels and coach buses. So at one point I was like, please stop going to state. No, I'm just kidding. But obviously that worked out great for everyone. So in terms of our grants, 96,000 compared to 67,000 that we raised. So we did lose some money this year, but like I said, we really are going to be hitting the ground running with our fundraising coming fall. Each year we give out 4 $750 scholarships, and these were the 4 students. It's always a really hard decision. We get so many great applications, and these were the 4 students that we gave out our scholarships to. Okay, plans for next year. I know the PTO already presented, and I think they talked a little bit about the partnership too, but Melissa and I really developed like a close relationship, and we thought, like, how can we both work together to benefit all of the schools? I mean, what we found is a bulk of the money really comes in at the elementary school levels, and then by the time they get to high school, people are kind of given out, so have other things to think about. So we really want to combine forces as much as we can. I feel like one great example of that this year was the food truck and just all of teacher appreciation. So we solicited all the donations as one, and then kind of spread them out among all the schools, and we shared the cost of the food truck, and that was great. And we'll do that again with the teacher gift cards coming up. Youth spiritware, they came to us and said, we really need more youth spiritware. People really want this. So we've ordered a ton more of that, and then we're going to be selling that at the ice cream social. Partnerships for shared spaces. So this coming year, we're going to do Raise Craze as a district, and we've decided that the first 25,000 raised across the board is going to go towards the weight room. So that's pretty exciting. I feel like that's kind of a great way that we can work together, and it's going to be publicized that we're raising it jointly for that purpose. So people understand that. And then, as I mentioned, our fundraiser, October 22nd, and I'm kind of excited. We're going to work with the Culinary Club and have the culinary students make some of the food. We did just grant a request for $2,000 for some new equipment for them, so it's kind of like a nice win-win. And then we're going to go to admin and coaches, advisors, and try to get as many experiences donated as we possibly can. I know football, every year they donate this yard cleanup, and that goes over really well. Sitting on a bench during games, some football seats, graduation seats, and maybe try to get a couple parking spots. This is a flag year for membership too, so we thought we'd try to promote this to the elementary schools as well. It's the only way they can get the flag is if you're a member, so we're hoping that people are gonna be excited about that. And then you also get, obviously, the passes to the sporting events, which that's all gonna be digital this year, so that'll be great. And then we did decide to raise our prices for membership this coming year. We haven't raised them in a while, so the base membership, the red and black, is gonna go from 40 to 50, and then the pirate from 100 to 125. So we're hoping that's gonna bring in a little more revenue. Obviously, all of our costs have gone way up for food and even the flags, and as you can imagine, like all of us, when we go grocery shopping, we're like, oh my gosh, so. Yeah, that's my summary. Anyone have any questions, any thoughts?
Just thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's been great. It's been a great year, super fun to be involved in everything, so,
So for the October 22nd,
yes.
are you looking like collecting other kinds of donations, like other?
Yes, we are. We have a great person in charge of fundraising right now. We just had another person sign on to help with that, so we're in the process of getting all the save the date info out, getting as many, other kind of silent auction and live auction items as we can. It's gonna be from 6 to 9. It's gonna be more of like a heavy hors d'oeuvre type of an event. We're gonna do a wine tasting, a beer tasting, and probably just like a bunch of hors d'oeuvres instead of a sit-down meal. So we're hoping like kind of the yacht club to have sort of a pirate theme. So.
I just had a comment. Marika, thank you for all of your hard work. I know it's been challenging. I want to emphasize to the board members, they granted every grant request that came across their table. So it's heavy on sports, but that's not because they favor sports. The other groups did not ask for money. And I want that really emphasized so that if you hear in the community that the Booster Club is only for sports, that is not true, that is not their mission, and that's not how they work. So I just want to make sure that that is understood at our level, so that if we hear rumblings in the community, that we can squash them. The other groups just need to ask for the money,
Yeah.
so.
Thanks, Stacy. That's a good point. And we did share this on social media, and I tried to emphasize clubs too, because we really do try to support the clubs as evenly as we do the sports as much as we possibly can.
Any other questions or comments from members?
Just want to thank the Booster Club.
Yeah, thanks for coming tonight, too.
Thank you. Again, we've seen it with the PTO, we see it with the Booster Club. We're super fortunate to have parents like Marika and Laura Wallace and the crew that we had from PTO, and just given so generously of their time and just super successful. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars that have went into our programs from these organizations. So we're super fortunate, and our kids are able to have experiences and have things that they would not otherwise be able to have. So thank you.
Yes, and we have a great board. I didn't introduce them all, but they're all fabulous and work really hard too, so I can't take all the credit, but yeah.
Well, thank you for coming in to speak with us and sharing this wonderful news about your contributions to students in the district.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you again.
Do we have any comments from citizens? No cards tonight. Salutes and recognitions. I'll turn to the board members first for salutes or recognitions.
I just wanted to salute again the PLE Encore teachers for their spring fling. You guys should have been there. They had the 4K kids doing kazoos.
That's
It
great.
was so cute.
Even I could handle that, maybe.
But just having 4-year-olds, 150 of them, because most of the morning kids came back too.
And I believe there was 150, Michelle Stanky had 150, inflatable be like beach ball things out there. She was very much hoping for a not very windy day.
It was perfect.
Sounds like it worked out.
Anyone else? I'll offer a couple. I love it's not for a specific person, but I love the tributes for the retirees. Those are so wonderful, the way that the staff members
speak about the impact that those individuals have had on their lives and their students' lives. And I just love the humor, the fun, and the gratitude that people express. So that was really terrific. I'd like to salute Brian, and I know it's the whole PHS team, but Brian Sniff and the PHS team for the way they handled the graduation this year. I thought it was wonderful that they opened up the opportunity for Isaac to take a different kind of role, and they allowed a different kind of experience to happen. I thought it was a terrific move by Brian to allow that to occur. And then Stacy and Larry from our own team here for representing the board, handing out the diplomas. So thank you very much for representing us for our community.
Can I just tag on to that? I did talk to Isaac after the ceremony and kind of asked him
Isaiah.
how he got selected and.
Isaiah.
Oh, Isaiah,
sorry,
sorry.
I apologize for
No, I'm
saying
just
that.
letting, just so you.
Anyway, I did ask him a little bit about how he got selected and what it was, but I think it's a reflection in terms of the work that Brian has done to try to engage students in a different way. And he had been apparently the person who does like a lot of the broadcasts or overhead
the
things
yeah.
during the school, and so the students really wanted him to be a part of it. So I thought that was pretty cool that he was able to do that, and he's a very energetic kind of person, lots of good things going for him in terms of stuff, so.
Isaiah is always happy to have a microphone in his hands.
Hey, it worked.
It's very natural.
Any of the administration members have anything they want to offer? For
Danielle
salutes,
or John?
recognition?
Just our Buildings and Grounds Department, last week, kickoff to summer, held annual training day where we bring in outside professionals and just enhance their skills overall, their skill set, just to keep them on top of it, keep them engaged. And we've got a longstanding staff, and keeping them on top of their game is something they pay a lot of attention to, and that has already occurred for this summer.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm just gonna echo what John said. It's not specific, except to say, I mean, so they had the training. They had, by the way, Sean Strauss. That guy can make some meat, man. He has the smoker, and so he helped make lunch for them. It was really, really good. But what I commented to the group was just, we talk about how good graduation goes, and the staff, administrative staff, or deservedly so, gets recognized. But as soon as that high school graduation was over and I was pulling around the back of the gym, the whole team of custodians are out there getting chairs and tearing it down. So, you know, they do so much of the unsung work behind the scenes to make sure things are set up, make sure everything's clean, that our guests come and are impressed with our facilities. So we're very fortunate to have that crew.
Great. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to the consent agenda, where we have minutes from our previous meetings. I didn't see any correspondence or gifts this time. We do have two policies to consider, 7100.03 Board Education Member Expectations, and 7100.07 Board of Education Officers. So if there's no questions, I'll take a motion there.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much, everyone. And now we move to new business, and we see our four APs out there, smiling faces, ready to share with us their updates for the student handbooks today. So did you get any questions that you would like to address? Are there questions from the team?
I thought they were appropriate.
Yeah.
You can do it, Katie. Easy for me to say.
Good evening. I don't think that we had any questions specific from board members regarding the changes that we made. Just to give you some context, each year we do meet to make sure that our handbooks are aligned and that they're developmentally appropriate for each one of our buildings. So you will see consistent changes, mostly through the buildings. So if you guys have any additional questions, we're happy to answer those now.
I guess I'll ask one. You know, the thing that always stands out is the dress code stuff. Are there any specific incidents, or is this just evolution of the language to try to take away people from complaining about it?
Probably a most high school specific piece here, Steve.
Yeah.
So Actually, Brian, speaking to what you said a moment ago about Brian being student-centered and with graduation, Brian and Brenton both worked with a group of students to come up with some more student-appropriate language, and so what you see there is the collaborative work of the school administration and students to come to what we thought was appropriate language used to describe what should be worn. Socially, there's some, some unrest, turmoil, disagreement, and so we're trying to be sensitive to what our students are at and the way that they feel things should be, but also maintaining a line of respect and decorum in the building as well.
Paul, would you say that's similar concept to the whole personal use of the personal device usage changes in the policy, or what was the driver behind some of those?
Yeah, so I'd have to go back and look exactly. I have both documents pulled up here. I think what we ended up doing there was, let me go back and look at the, give me 1 second, Steve.
Sure.
I think what we ended up doing was just changing it from one, if you have one incident and this happens, and 2 instances, it wasn't a whole overhaul of the.
Okay.
Give me a second, let me look into it and I'll
No
come back
worries.
and answer
No
your
worries.
question.
I didn't prepare you for this. I apologize.
Okay.
I have a quick question to follow up on that, and Katie, you might be, answer it, that if I looked at it correctly, and I didn't necessarily like do a side-by-side, but the high school and the middle school were exactly the same, right, or aligned?
Correct.
I didn't go down to PLE level, but.
And yep, at times, like, we'll have discussions based upon anything that we need to adopt at the district level. But PLE and Horizon often have similar changes, and then PHS and ASA, we often have similar changes. So, if there's consistent threads that need to be, strung throughout all of them, we make sure that we're all on the same page there. But when it comes to those specifics, it's appropriate to keep them together and us together, but it's important that we collaborate on that as well.
So that gives them 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade.
Yeah, right. They should figure it out, right?
Took the load off of Paul, right?
Thank you, Paul.
Just try to make his job easier.
Yeah.
I can speak to the question you asked, Steve, related to the personal device use. So through COVID, I think we saw an uptick. I don't think we saw an uptick in student reliance on device and screen time and so forth. And so just trying to set a more strict parameter for teachers to give them a little bit more lean on in their classrooms.
Good.
And really that's what that boils down to.
I think that's great. Thank you for helping the teachers out. I know that that's got to be a struggle for them.
We hear a lot about it.
Yeah, I bet.
And so it seems appropriate that we move to a little bit more of a stringent approach to it.
Thank you. Other questions, board members? Well, thank you all for coming in tonight. We really appreciate your work on this. We know it's not a glamorous thing to do to redo the handbook, but it's necessary and valued, so thank you.
Are you able to hang through the discipline discussion, just in case there's a question? Thank you.
Next on the agenda, Danielle, to talk about standards adoption.
Yeah, so this is the annual standards adoption requirement by state statute that we have to do. Essentially, we have to adopt the standards that are a part of our curriculum annually and post those on our website. So that's what you see attached there. I went through and made sure that all of the links were properly working. Sometimes they dislink and stuff. I will note that we've always previously adopted this in June. Just recently, they changed it so that it now needs to be adopted in July, but we found that out late last week. So it was already on the agenda for tonight. So you'll see this, we can take action tonight, and then you'll see it next board meeting as well, which we essentially need to say we're going to adopt the standards that we adopted last month, this month again, and stuff. So, and then after that, we will just continue to bring this back in July.
Yeah, the
Should we
basic.
Should we bother doing anything tonight if we gotta do it again in July? It just,
That's up to you guys.
I think it's a smart decision, Brian. We'll just table this item to
yeah.
next discussion. We could ask any questions any board members have, but otherwise we can take action next time.
Yeah, the state requires, we just got a notice a couple days ago that we saw come through that stated at the first meeting of the year, which for schools is the meeting in July, you must, in essence, have this on your agenda to publicize.
Was there a reasoning for the,
I'd never noticed that before. We've been doing this for, since I was in Danielle's role, and I don't remember that ever being required.
Maybe they just wanted some clarity around
Yeah.
the timing of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's so everybody, if they're looking for that, knows when it happens.
you didn't get any questions, did you?
No.
I think we should, I move to table this agenda item.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. We'll review this one again and take action on it at our next meeting. Thank you. Thanks, Brian, for that suggestion. Student behavior update and discussion. This was an item that we talked about last meeting to bring to the board, just so we could see what's going on after hearing concerns from teaching staff, from administration, that, you know, things were pretty tough this year, and we want to make sure we're my agenda is to make sure we're supportive of our staff and helping make sure that we're giving the resources and time and allocating the attention to this matter to help our staff be successful. So, Brian, I think we all saw the data that was presented and shared with us regarding the report that Candace pulled together, I believe, and a note there from Mike. So Mike, you want to go through that for us?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So, we were able to meet with all buildings last week and just kind of talk about how the year went. The data that Candace provided helps paint a picture, and we knew experientially that there was challenges, right? And we heard repeatedly from colleagues in districts all over that they were having a similar experience, that student behaviors, in particular in the middle grades, were kind of at a level we haven't seen before in terms of their frequency, the pervasiveness of it, the way that that's stressing staff. So that is, and so there's lots of theories as to what might drive some of that, from, you know, pandemic kinds of impact, lack of socialization, those kinds of things that in some cases may have stunted maturity or just experience with that kind of structure. Even though we were in person throughout last year, it wasn't consistently for this age of students necessarily until semester 2. But whatever the reasoning is, that's been kind of a common thread nationally, statewide, regionally. I know Katie and Anthony have already reached out and formed a group with multiple administrators from other middle schools where they all are going to come together and share notes from other districts, kind of talk about what they've experienced, and so they can collaborate for plans for the fall. But you know, I mean, these are, as the data shows, the total incidents of discipline are really within normal ranges. It's just there's a concentration that we've seen with a couple of classes that we've had this year, which really stressed Asa Clark in particular. And I think that team did a really good job managing those challenges. But certainly we want to have a plan for next year. But we did see certainly things at Horizon as well. As I indicated, some of that, some of those numbers are driven by better record keeping in terms of quantifying and capturing and documenting things that have happened. But you know, I talked to one of our Phi Ed teachers at one of our elementary schools, talking about students who were largely virtual the year before. Took them a while longer to acclimate to the procedures and how Phi Ed class would run and what those expectations were versus students who were in person. So there was just a number of things that were making this year a little bit different. So regardless, we spent some time, and knowing that we're only a week or two out of school since the school year ended, just game planning and reflecting on the year. And so when we talk about behavior, discipline, and you just approved handbooks, so that outlines a lot of what the rules and expectations are. But you really have kind of these two major areas that you use to address it. One is your standard discipline, procedures, consequences, right? You do this happens, and making sure students understand the rules and expectations, and then the consistency of enforcement. So your office referral process, progressive discipline, those kinds of things. And then you have the other side, which is really important, is that developmental teaching of how we behave and how we solve problems and how we have conflict resolution with peers and those kinds of things. So it's really, there is no single solution. It's multiple solutions. The other piece I would say, and we've talked a lot about mental health in this room and into strategic planning. One of the big stressors for staff wasn't necessarily, kids who ultimately got suspended. It was safety checks and those kinds of things for students who are really struggling with mental health issues. So all of that combined put a lot of pressure on the teaching staff, on the administrative staff, on the student services staff in that this year. So I know the 4 associate principals are meeting again in a couple of weeks. We're going to have a plan fleshed out by August in terms of some specific pieces that are going to be put in place. Working with our teaching staff, what are the key things we're going to communicate to students? What are our processes going to be to kind of streamline some of what we're doing? Everything from how are we having more proximity and supervision, right, and visibility, because sometimes just an adult standing in a location where things might happen deters things from happening. So there's a lot of pieces that can be done and put into place, and so that's what we'll be working on over the summer. But our 4 associate principals who do an awesome job are here. Happy to take any questions that you have.
Mike, I do have a question.
Yeah.
You just spoke to that bullet point talking about strategies including visibility and more supervision. Do we currently use very many volunteers in ASA? As a volunteer that has worked in Horizon, I'm here to say I would love to help out in ASA Clark. I don't know how many volunteers we use in ASA, and is that something where we could use volunteers to be in the halls or be in the lunchroom to help with those adult eyes that maybe sometimes could deter a student from misbehavior?
Yeah, and I remember that coming up in one of the rooms I was in during strategic planning. I know, Katie, do you guys have many volunteers that support supervision? Yeah, why don't you come on down to...
Maybe we get up again.
Thank you for bringing that up. One specific area that so when Mike talks about data, right, we look at this frequently too, and one of the data points we look at is the area. So teachers can flag different areas, whether it be the classroom, an elective classroom, the hallway, outside, cafeteria. We were seeing an uptick in the cafeteria, and so we had put out to families, hey, if anyone wants to volunteer just as an extra body in the cafeteria, because the way that the new cafeteria is set up, it's a nice space, but it is pretty big to be able to cover and monitor. And we had a decent response for that. I think that a process improvement would be, what is that, like, prior to coming in, what is that training overview? What are those expectations? So that way all the adults in the building, whether they're a parent or a custodian or a classroom teacher, we're all consistent in that messaging. That's something that we're looking to do. But, engaging community and family is for volunteering positions, I think is a great idea, and something we dabbled with this year and had, a couple people come in throughout the spring, which was really nice to have.
Yeah, I think you're right about the training piece, because it's fine if they listen, but if students aren't cooperative or those kinds of things, then what's your process? If you're a volunteer and you're maybe not getting cooperation, if you're telling a group of kids to clean up your table and they, don't give you a positive response and, or say something they shouldn't or stand up and leave, which may happen. So how do we want to volunteer? Because we don't want volunteers running into lots of conflict, those kinds of things. It's more about having a presence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Middle school?
Middle school, yeah.
And I'm just trying to do it in terms of trying to figure this out. So we opened up the expanded ASA partially in the 1920 school year. We moved some kids.
2021.
2021, okay.
Yeah, this was our second year.
Second year there, okay. So the 7th graders, 8th graders, when we opened it up, Were they like seventh graders or eighth graders?
So our eighth grade class, our current eighth grade class, did not have one consistent year in middle school that they were in the classroom, in the building, all day. It was COVID for them, for those 2 years. And so that we saw through our data as being a real trigger point. And Paul and I have been in a lot of communication about how do we support that. I think that something was pushed out on Instagram recently about the transition day that Paul has been planning with the student services team at the high school. That's strategic, to think about how we support that eighth grade group, because they in particular had some really big challenges this year, specifically interacting appropriately with one another and with adults. You know, when you think about COVID, reliance on technology, it was an isolation period, and kids weren't used to being held accountable by someone who is there in person. And so how do you respond, you know, it's just something that they didn't get the chance to learn and practice every day during their middle school formative years. So that group in particular, our seventh grade group as well was up, and our sixth grade group was kind of typical. So, thinking comparatively for those years, our eighth graders, you know, really just didn't have the opportunity to practice those social skills as frequently as they would have if it wasn't a pandemic.
But going back though, I mean, so I thought we moved some kids from Horizon into ASA.
You're
PLE
thinking
into
PLE.
Horizon.
We moved some PLE kids early.
PLE to Horizon, we moved four classrooms.
Yeah, from the third grade over
Third
early,
grade.
but no.
But early on, I thought we
Oh.
had a couple teachers or a few teachers that moved into ASA.
Sixth grade teachers?
Sixth grade, but that goes
Yes.
back another year, right?
But you think that it was in the 2018-19 year, or
No,
I'm sorry, 2019-20? You think some of the,
No,
No.
I don't think so. Unless a teacher moved here early.
2021 would have been, because the school was done. The
Right.
school was done in 2021.
Yeah, no sixth graders came over to ASA until 2021.
Yeah. Fall of 2020 was when the transition happened. So it's the 2020,
But you're saying,
2021
okay, so
school year.
did we move everybody then in 2021?
Yeah.
I thought we had somebody, or was it just that? Horizon?
PLE, third graders, we had some space, and there was several third grade groups that moved over a year early as part of that transition, which allowed us to get in and actually do some renovation and part of PLE, but we didn't have groups move over to ASA early.
My misunderstanding that, so. So you're working on it?
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, we'd love to hear anything you come up with that you want to share with the board and ways that we can help. I mean, that's what we're here to do, is support all of you and all of your teams. So as you learn more, as you figure out strategies and you need help with funding or resources or, just attention, we're here to help you.
We appreciate that. And I think, you know, a big part of it is training our teachers and giving them the professional development they need, because they're on the front lines, right? They're the ones who are facing our kids. And I think that our house model is really great at the middle school for developing those relationships. When you do develop relationships and kids are vulnerable with you and share things, you want to do something about it. And our teachers are very well versed in how to recognize a deficit in math and apply content knowledge there. It's a lot harder when they have a deficit in self-management or regulating emotions or conflict resolution. They don't have that toolkit built up to say, I know exactly what strategy you need right now. So we're exploring some resources that can help support our staff from a professional development standpoint, from a lesson deployment standpoint. And so while the handbook is put before you today, you know, expect some more information to come forth as far as the specific plans for the upcoming school year, because we want to make sure that we're being responsive to the needs that we saw through the data, that we heard through teacher conversation and observation, to make sure that we're, you know, marching in a good path come fall.
So one nugget to that you'll see in the July board packet will be a resource that Oconomowoc has used for a while, one that we're exploring, looking at, that we want to, get our hands on so that we can look more deeply into. And it does have a cost associated with it, which we're good for to be able to afford, but that'll be a piece that we'll show you and note in the July 11th one, just so that we can start planning and looking to see what elements of a resource like that would be helpful, because Oconomowoc has seen some success with that
And
resource.
we're meeting on Wednesday for that first like regional principals PLC. We're actually going to host it here in schools like New Berlin or Oconomowoc and Elmbrook and Wauwatosa and Waukesha. Like there's representatives from each one of those districts, just from middle schools, just to try to hear what's working well, what are they thinking about, what are they working on. So tapping into others, because we know that we're not alone in this. So that'll be really helpful.
So, I mean, they're experiencing
Oh, yeah.
similar-ish? Okay.
Yep, yep. Which is reassuring, but also somewhat scary because there's not a path forged. We all went through this at the same time with the same group of kids, and so no one has the solution. We just have observations and then the minds to come together to try to put some plans in place and see if they're impactful.
We heard it really consistently when we had our visits from the Institute for Personalized Learning. You know, we had folks from all over the country, Missouri,
right?
Kentucky, I want to say, some other states. And when they would come to ASA, one of the first questions they would ask Anthony was like, are you guys seeing an uptick in student behavior issues? And so, yep, and so you hear it nationally as well.
Yeah, very, very consistent, very consistent. And we're excited about, part of my communication is going to a school-based, school psych model, so we're gonna be hiring a school psych dedicated to Asa Clark. So now we'll have one for each building in the district. It'll provide additional capacity to, again, handle, so we're not, whenever you have to split people across buildings, it always kind of, diminishes their capacity, because they're trying to cover extra bases. So now they can really be focused on what are the specific issues in that building. And I think that'll be it's an example, Steve, of what you're talking about, whether it's a resource like was referenced by Danielle that Oconomowoc's using, providing that resource to the schools, or the right staffing. Those are the kinds of things that we want to make sure we have in place.
We certainly want to help the kids who are struggling, and we want to help the ones who are not struggling too, because they're having to deal with it as well.
So when did this aha moment occur, in the sense that you started realizing that the behavior problems were there? Was it like at the
October.
of last year then? So October 2021?
Yeah, it was a fall unlike any other, where we were like, wow, it's only October, and these are the numbers that we're seeing.
And then you're calling your other friends and colleagues and saying,
Right.
oh, yeah.
And you know what's really hard, Larry, is when you're in it, it's hard to be proactive with it, right? And so it's like we would utilize those breaks as far as like, okay, winter break, let's powwow and see what do we need to do here to try to make some impactful change here in the spring. But the floodgates were open, and so I think that we did the best that we could with the time that we had to be able to be proactive in some measures. But now is the time where we can really dive in and get, like, that detailed report from Candace was really, really helpful, because it shed some light on some different areas and some different topics that we know that we need to cover a little bit more in depth from that disciplinary standpoint, and then also just be really mindful of what teaching practices we have in place for everyone, and then also those more intensive levels. So thinking about the RTI model that we talked about earlier in the summer, there's definitely the need for smaller group, more intensive services for subsets of kids that frequently, have difficulty managing their behavior in certain areas.
Other than, okay, so in one of the charts, it's the one that talks about student discipline incidents overall, 2018 to 2022. So the class of 2026 has a very large blue in the 2018 school year. So if that was like totally pre-COVID, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
that's when they were in
When the
fourth
class
grade.
of 2027 and the class of 2026 have been together in the same building, we've seen challenges, particularly when they were at Horizon together as well. The class of 2027, their lower number, I think like 62 incidences, that's when they were in third grade. And the
Right,
other
they were
group
in
was in
PLE.
fourth grade, so they were not in the same building. So there has been a trend with these two cohorts.
And cohorts have characteristics. Sometimes it's academic, sometimes they're behavioral, and we have a little bit of a track record with these groups, and to your point, Steve, we gotta help those kids figure it out and, make sure that the others aren't negatively affected by the disruption.
Yeah, but even then, though, potentially that 2026 class, 2018, 2019, 2022, they're kind of consistent there, right? So,
Yep,
good luck, Paul.
just got this.
We're gonna, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks for pulling the data together and putting the team together to work to try to solve it.
Yep.
I mean, that's what we're all here for.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. That takes us to personnel issues. So we have a resignation to act on tonight? Maybe two. Actually, two now, right?
We have two. We have Kelly Rober's first grade teacher. Took a job closer to home, I believe in Burlington, if I'm remembering. So she's done a really nice job for us, just wanted to be closer to home. And David Woodford, who's, I'm sure pretty well, has done a great job for us. He was a high school counselor originally, and then he served as our student assistance coordinator, which was a position created about, I want to say 6-7 years ago, because it was under Joanne. And that was created and David's done a lot of mental health training and those things. But David's really got a desire to go back into that high school counseling role, and he's found himself a position doing that. So I would take any questions you have, otherwise seek your approval of the resignations for Kelly Robers and David Woodford.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, team. So we also have some employments to act on. Is it still the two that are listed here, Jessica and Madeline?
Yes, so again, I'd take any questions, but I would seek your approval for Jessica Natter, 6th grade ELA teacher, and Madeline Scampoli, speech pathologist for Horizon and ASA.
Any questions, team?
Move to approve the two hirings.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you, everyone.
And we have one leave.
Yeah, so Tasha.
Yep, so Tasha Igelski, who's our high school choir teacher, for family reasons, is requesting a 1-year leave of absence, which I recommend for approval. We fully understand and support Tasha's desire to, put her priorities where they should be with her family first. And so we actually raised the idea with her for a 1-year leave as an option as opposed to resignation, because she is super talented, super good at her job. If there is an opportunity after a year for her to come back, we would love to have her back. So again, I would take any questions that you have, but would recommend your approval of a 1-year leave of absence for Tasha Igelski. Brian?
I just want to say I was really moved by her work. It sounds like she's already started doing to prepare whoever the long-term sub is. That's amazing.
Are you gonna have any issues finding a long-term sub for her, or?
Well, music's always a challenge to hire someone. It's a full year limited term position, so I think that'll help. I think when you have these shorter positions and people want to know they have a job for an entire year, will probably help get a fuller applicant pool. But music, music's a challenge to find good people. So we'll see what we get, but I'm sure we'll make it work. And to Stacy's comment, yeah, that's Tasha's just, epitomizes being a high quality professional, and so that doesn't surprise me that she's already planning and preparing.
Someone like to make a
Move
motion?
to approve the leave of absence request for our choir teacher.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Takes us to board goals and operations. So upcoming activities. Here's a list I have. If you have something you think to add to this, I'm happy to add to the list. but we do have the July 8th and 9th WASB Summer Leadership Institute over in La Crosse. I'm not sure if anybody has signed up for that, but that is going on. Larry, thank you, Larry. On July 11th, we'll have business affairs and a board meeting, 6 and 7 p.m. July 12th, I think there's an SWSA meeting on the 12th. I saw the calendar, it looked like it was on there. August 17th, I think, is the next event after that, which is our new teacher breakfast and a possible board meeting for new hire approvals. August 22nd, business affairs again at 6, the board at 6:30, and then our annual meeting at 7, and that meeting is in the auditorium. And then the next day, we'll have our welcome back breakfast and a possible board meeting if we need one on the 23rd.
It doesn't seem like there's much space between the end of one and the start of the next. Like, oh no.
Well, there was a
Just do a
month there
lock-in,
from
sleep
July
over.
12th to August 17th, so use what you can get, right? Are there any other items that I missed?
Steve, could you speak more to the July 11th, 13th, where you wanted us to work with the administration?
Yeah, so I was in a conversation with Danielle about my learning from the San Diego event, and there were a couple of things that I brought back from that. One was this idea of a profile of a board member, and the other was a profile of an educator. So I was mentioning that to Danielle, and I talked about the potential that we might, as a board, decide we want to work on this profile concept, and that, you know, we would potentially want to work on some of these competencies. And she offered that the administrative team from the district is doing a contribute project and invited us to participate. So, free
Yes,
libraries.
so totally voluntary, just let me know if you're interested. So, we do I think most of you know, we do a service learning project every year during our leadership week as part of giving back to our community and contributing. And so this year, we're working in conjunction with the Pewaukee Park and Rec Department to build 3 free little libraries that are gonna be placed at Nettisheim, Wagner, and Liberty Park. So the Monday of the board meeting, July 11th, from like 3:30 to, what did I put in the times there? Like 3:30 to 6, basically. We're gonna be like staining all of the materials. Ben Graham is gonna have them all pre-cut for us, and then we'll be staining them down in the PHS Tech Ed rooms. And then on Wednesday, July 13th, we'll actually come here at like 12:30, assemble them, and then go and send teams to each of the locations to install them. And so you are welcome to join us if you would like. Like I said, just totally voluntary, but Steve mentioned the idea of maybe the board wanting to do, at some point, contribute things, and I just offered it up as an option if anybody is interested.
So you actually want us there, okay.
We do. We love having
Many
you
hands
guys
make
there.
light work.
I'm having trouble with that.
Yeah, so, and it's, you know, we have plenty of hands. If no one is interested, that's fine. But we'll also take extra hands. That's always welcome too.
You need supervisors or anything?
That's my
We'll
job.
get you on the post hole digger for the.
Danielle, if anyone is interested, should they contact you then?
Yeah, if you can just let me know, and I don't know, Steve, if you want to know as well, just so that I just know, just so I can divvy up people into work groups.
So we can do it as individuals, or we can decide to do it as a board if it supports a larger goal that we have as a board organization. To do something, we could make it also support that. And the other reason I thought it was an interesting idea was that, you know, we talk about the fact that in most years, we get a big group of us to go down to NSBA together, and that's a way that we build relationships with our administrative partners. And we didn't get to do that this year. And we have 2 new board members, and so I thought that this would be another chance for us to build relationships with the administrative team and some exposure outside of this room to some members that we don't get to speak to, except in this environment. So I thought it would be an interesting opportunity, and again, it's clearly not part of the expectations of a board member as we currently define them to do this, But if it's something that the board is interested in pursuing, I'm certainly supportive of it, and the administrative team has reached out and offered a way to start, either in a larger project of the profile of a board member goal, or just as a way to get together and contribute to our community.
I can bring my own tools. I'll dust them off. I like the idea.
I do too.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks.
So let Danielle know, and she'll get you organized.
And if you can come for part of days or whatever too, or one day, not the other, that's totally fine too. Just kind of let me know your availability and I'll let you know where to come.
I think that takes us to legislative advocacy.
Oh, I have a
updates.
question. Are we
please.
gonna, schedule a goals committee? Aren't we doing, is that a later discussion?
Yeah, so, Larry, would you just give an outline of how we typically have done this?
Yes, well, it kind of comes together after we have an opportunity to do a few of the things that we're gonna do tonight, or work with Mike in terms of his board goals and some of the strategic planning things that are out there. But yeah, we kind of pull together sometime in the month of July. and
Yeah.
Going together, so.
Yeah, I thought it was July.
It's usually around the time that the administrative team meets and does their week together, so they start formulating their concepts for the goals, the work that comes out of the strategic planning update.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, normally, I would say I usually get a draft of goals early August usually from Larry, because you guys have a meeting typically, and, I mean, we have my evaluation process next meeting, so there's that discussion. There's the strategic planning pieces. We do the week of Leadership Week, some work on drafts of it would be our year 2 tactical plan of our 3-year strategic plan that we'll be working on. So there's that information, and a big driver of the goals has always been what the strategic plan
Yeah, if
objectives
there's
are.
any updates to it, but,
Yeah.
and this is a document that's out there if you had a chance to look at it, but it's the Superintendent and Board of Education goals.
Yeah.
We kind of worked that through, and obviously this year there's gonna be a bigger committee group looking at that, but.
So
Yeah,
Shane, I
those are
think
thoughts.
your intent is to get that scheduled so that you can,
Oh, we were just talking about schedule and we had got to August, but
Yeah.
we didn't talk, I knew you had mentioned July
Yeah.
and then it wasn't on there, so I just didn't know if I was missing something.
so for those of you who have volunteered to be a part of that committee, we'll come up with a schedule and get something out and some possible dates so that we can all get together and start talking the process through. And normally we meet once and then we might share some emails back and forth, and then we come back to the full board with our recommendations and hear the full board's thoughts and ideas, and then we go back off and finalize that document for board approval.
Yep. So when you get a date determined, then let Julie know so she can post it.
Yeah, and it's usually, I mean, like after the July 11th meeting that we have with Mike, because I mean, we go through these pretty closely with him, and they kind of by design tend to mesh in terms of there's board goals, superintendent goals, in terms of how we pull that together. And then if there's anything else that's out there, we'll also might have some things from our later conversation tonight with anything related to the board meeting evaluation tool that we did, so.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Yep. Put it on the calendars, right, so.
On legislative advocacy, I haven't heard anything. I did attend the monthly update from the WASB this week, and there was some conversation about some national items and some local items that I did hear in that update. Where was that? No, I don't have those notes.
I have,
Sorry.
no, it's not a lot happening that I've, there's some of the recent things that I've seen notifications out, Governor Evers had put a note out to his agencies to avoid spending additional spending, because of economic conditions and those things, even with the surplus that they're sitting on, to be conservative in their plans, based on how things are going. He did the same thing a couple of years ago, in advance, but then he did end up advocating for increases. So there's some of the preliminary wranglings, I think that's gonna lead to the next biennium, discussions. But it's heavily influenced by, I think, just the election cycle, so.
Yeah, I guess I did have my notes. There was some talk about a committee that was being formed around support for school district shared resources. So I'm not sure what the status of that committee is, but there's something that's coming to try to help school districts develop strategies or put legislation in place to allow that to occur. And there was some work, and obviously, you know, there's some work going on nationally with school safety. And so those are the couple of items that they spoke about in the monthly update. Okay, if nothing else further there, then the last item that's on board goals and operations was our survey and the preliminary results. And Candace sent out the link. I know that all of you got the report. I'd love to hear your thoughts as you looked at the notes, the comments, the results of the initial survey that we took as a trial.
Well,
Anything that stood out?
I think it was just a good check on ourselves. I didn't see anything that was stuck out as an issue or anything like that, so I think it's just a good check to make sure we're holding to process and things like that, so. But I didn't see anything that concerned me. I don't know if anybody else did.
No concerns, but a comment. One of the comments was that pre-board meeting, that if you put a question out about something on the agenda, it was mentioned that potentially the answer coming back could be sent to all the board members, because potentially that person came up with that question, but if the question and answer were put out to all the board members, maybe we'd say, hey, I didn't think of that question, but I'm really glad to have that information. So I thought that was a good suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good suggestion from that anonymous survey.
Yeah.
Make
Yeah.
that comment. One thing I would say is, in doing so, the only thing I would advise is, if we're gonna be replying, you know, you cannot then follow up comment. Because then it starts to create a dialogue, and then we get into walking quorum issues. So yes, it's good to have that information, but if
You need to just
Brian asks a
absorb
question,
it.
I reply to
Right, and
everybody.
not
here.
come back and
Right.
respond.
Yeah, and then there's commentary, then it gets to be, then we're treading on some ground that we don't wanna tread on, that's all.
Would it make more sense to do it the way John does in our business affairs meetings? He discusses the questions and answers when we're in a meeting.
Yeah, and that would be very appropriate as well.
But that would be just for the business affairs people.
Well, no, but I'm saying,
Oh,
Mike,
For the general
Yeah.
packet for the
like,
meeting.
that's how we would handle questions. And when we're physically in meeting, if it's Mike or Danielle or whoever it is that took the question, would summarize it.
Yeah, there's, you know, when you said that, Stacy, I'm thinking even, you know, we could just kind of add it as
A board operation.
a board up, but have it maybe in the front end of the meeting is when it would make sense. Because those questions are always germane to stuff we're probably gonna be dealing with in new business. If it was something that wasn't related to the agenda, then we wouldn't talk
Oh,
about it.
right.
But if it was on the agenda,
Oh, I guess I assumed it was something that was on the agenda.
yeah, or what we could do is, you know, maybe it could just, Steve, a standing piece where, you know, did you receive any questions, or,
Yep.
and then we could say, yes, these are the questions I received, and here's the response.
Yep, that's good.
As part of the presentation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so if
Yeah.
it was a curricular question, you know, Danielle said, yes, I had 2 questions from board members, here are the questions, here's the information.
I
I
think
mean,
that's a great way
sometimes
to.
we do that. I mean,
Yeah, sometimes we do. We're just not consistent about it.
Danielle, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I already do that just as standard operating, is that I let you guys know that when I'm presenting an item already.
So I think we do, but we don't do it on everything and all
Yeah.
questions
Yeah.
all the time. We do it on some things, but not all things. The only barrier would be if it's not an item on the agenda. And so then it could be, no, that wouldn't work. I was gonna say it could go in the DA report, but that's already out to you before we get the questions, so that wouldn't work.
So one of the questions in the survey that got a little bit of a lower score, I'd love to just toss out there to the board to ask any thoughts you have. And that was, in the meeting portion, like the actual meeting portion, at least a portion of each meeting was dedicated to an update on key district goals, strategic priorities, or improvement initiatives that have been established by the board. And that one got the lowest, if I read this right, they got the lowest score of all the questions that we had.
What was the average?
3.4, which isn't substantially lower, but it's definitely lower. Like the next lowest one was like 3.6.
The reason I answered that one the way I did was reading the question, I don't feel we spend time in our meeting, but it's presented to us in our materials. So I don't feel we're not giving it attention.
Oh, it's the
I'm
way that-
comfortable
the
with
way
the
it
way
was
we're
asked.
doing
Yeah.
it, I guess. Yes,
Okay.
it was the way it was asked.
Okay.
So if I'm missing something and we should be discussing more, we're not.
Gotcha.
But if we're all good with the way it's going, which I'm fine with the way it's going, that it's presented to us and we have the ability to discuss if we need to, but it's not given attention at the meeting. That's why I answered it the way I did.
I think it's a good observation for us to think about, should there be more attention to that during the meetings deliberately, or is the way we do it just sufficient for everyone? And, you know, I know Mike always includes a link to board, his goals, in the materials that we receive. If that's sufficient, maybe it is, maybe there's, you know, during the policy committee earlier, we actually talked about some things related to board operations, a policy there and a board goals conversation, so maybe there's a space for board updates on that kind of stuff too during a board meeting, board performance update.
Yes.
But if it was asked differently, you would have
Yes.
answered differently, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that question out because I saw that it was a slightly lower score, and I don't want it to not be discussed if there's a concern in that space. So, any questions or comments related to the what went well and the concern areas and the improvement opportunities?
Can we
Or
go
Larry?
back to another
Yes,
section?
please, Larry, go
It's
back.
just probably some of the same questions, though, in terms of, we had a number of areas under the public comment periods where it was, I guess I would say, not applicable or not sure. So there's like a series of, like, a couple people on that one, and the public comment periods were used in a manner that is consistent with the board goals and expectations. Public comments were appropriately referred for follow-up. That one had, 3 people said either not applicable or not sure.
We didn't have any public comments for 2 meetings in a row. I think that's probably a reflection of that, is my guess.
Because we're reflecting on that particular meeting.
That was what we discussed, is we would do it based on that particular
So they're
meeting.
not applicable applied there, okay, so that was the interpretation.
That's how I interpret it, Larry.
Okay,
Which is a good point to do this more than once a year too, so.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you'll catch different data points if you do it more randomly.
I mean, 3 meetings weren't enough, Jane and? Just kidding on that one. So, okay, so that was kind of like the issue with that then, okay.
I'd say so.
There was another one where it was on any issue where the board requested follow-up research, information, et cetera. The administration had a clear record in understanding of what was requested when the information was expected. So it looked like there were a couple not applicable or not sure on that question.
I can speak to that one too. Again, I took it literally. I don't know that the admin has always responded. I presume they do when they say they're going to, because I feel like I'd hear about it if you didn't, when you said you were going to. So do you know what I mean? So I had to, again, I was answering it the way it was presented. I don't know that for sure, but that's my presumption. And knowing the professionalism of our admin, I just assume they do it. But I don't know that for sure.
Okay. But again, that may trigger one of those plan, do, study, act kind of things. I mean, if it's something that's important, how do we get feedback knowing that
Right.
it was followed up on some communication somewhere, somehow, right? So, potentially, but,
Potentially.
yeah, okay.
I feel like, again,
I don't,
I trust them. And I'd hear about it if they
Okay.
didn't. Oh, from who?
okay. Sorry about that.
No, it's good.
No,
This
good
is the
discussion.
purpose
Yeah.
of this. This is the first time we're doing this. We're supposed to ask questions. We're supposed to debate these things so we understand how people answered the questions and what it means to each of us.
Steve, going back to that question that you threw out and Stacy's answer about the amount of questions that are asked at board meetings and the amount of discussion that we have, I think all of us want to make sure that we're really transparent with parents and the community. And administration does such a good job of getting us the information ahead of time so that we can review and we ask our questions, and we're on top of our game when we come here. But I wonder if the community feels like they get enough information, if there's not enough discussion, or you know what I mean, Steve?
Yeah.
That maybe if we did do more questioning, more discussion here at the meetings, that the community would get more information, because if you look at what the public content is versus what we have, there is a huge difference, and I understand that, but I wonder how the community feels if they're getting enough transparency through our discussion just in the meeting alone.
No, I think that's fair. And then I balance that against some of the comments that came through in the surveys about concerns about the length of the meetings being long.
Yeah.
And so we have to figure out what that right balance is. You know, the concern someone expressed, and I don't know who, doesn't matter, was that our community may not participate in our meetings if we make them too long. So it's, you know, how do we find that right balance of important items that we need to be clear about and transparent about, and keep our meetings as relevant as they should be? So.
Can I ask the admin, have you ever received a community question based on when the agenda is posted and the pieces of information that they get before a meeting? Has anyone come to you and said, oh, I'm gonna use you, Danielle, I see that such and such curriculum is gonna be discussed. I was wondering if I could, you know, because they'll see it on the agenda, right? Before the meeting. Has anything like that ever happened?
Maybe. Trying to, I mean, we get questions sometimes, usually, I mean, in the past year, I'm sure we've had some questions about things that, and I know we've had things that people wanted on the agenda. We had a lot of that last year. I used to get a lot of COVID questions when that was a piece, and there were times I know I proactively reached out to some of our more engaged community members on what was gonna come up in like a COVID plan, so that they knew ahead of time. This is, you know, this is gonna be presented, here's what we're trying to accomplish, get some feedback. So there's been some dialogue in those cases before board meetings, but it's not very common that happens.
But just to tag along in terms of your comments, though, I think that was some of the discussion that we were having in my head relative to, we've now gone more public with our board meetings. We have the video things, but if we still conduct things where you have a question, you sent it to John or you sent it to Danielle, and we never bring that back up, people don't know that you were asking a question about something of substance. And I think that's the whole point of the transparency part of it, because again, people are not gonna be sitting here listening to us, but they can take the video live streaming and go back and look at it, and they'll say, well, you guys approved that, but you never asked a single question. And you're gonna say, oh, yes, I did. I sent it to Danielle and she responded back to me. Well, that's not being transparent in my mind. So if there's a way we can incorporate in when we have board members or other folks that are submitting those questions, I think we have an obligation to be transparent back and saying, yes, indeed, the question was asked and here's the response that was sent back, or something along those lines. Because that's being transparent in my mind. Because again, the people that are sitting on the other side watching us, you know, they don't know that we sent those things through, so, but good question though.
It's good. I think these are all good things for us to bring out as an organization. We may not solve all of them right away, but it's a good debate for us to have and try to find that right balance between meetings that go long and community members being discouraged by the length of the meeting versus the amount of information that they can receive by participating in our public meeting.
Well, and I would say to our conversation here about making a point of sharing out questions, that's not gonna probably extend the meeting by 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, probably not 5 minutes. I mean, there's, usually we can say, Brian sent these questions, a lot of, if it's fine, because he's the treasurer now, John might say, I received a couple of questions from members, here's was the questions, here's the response. Give an example, Brennan and Jane asked a similar question to your point before the meeting about the change from all students receiving free lunch to going back to free and reduced lunch applications, which currently is what is supposed to happen for next year, although John did point out that is still up for some discussion at the federal level. And how are we going to communicate, right, to make sure families that they're aware that, hey, you'll probably be paying for lunches next year. So that's an example of a question that came up before a meeting, but that would only take a moment on the front end of, and I assume you saw that probably in the handbook pieces, right? So it would have been relevant to the handbook discussion. So that process, it makes those things transparent. It doesn't take a lot of time. It still works with the questions ahead of time piece, which I think is really important because then that puts us in a position to give you guys the right information and good answers.
Any other observations from either the comments or the numeric results? I think it would be helpful for us to do this again, but I think we should wait a little while, and then I'd love to bring this back out to all of you and do another survey and see how it compares and what we make better and what we find ways or opportunities to improve.
Well, one of the comments we addressed, I think, at the last meeting with the November meeting.
Yep.
So you've got that taken care of, so
Yep.
that's a nice response to that. And then the improving the meetings, I don't know if there's anything specific in there, but, because usually those are pretty intense.
Yes.
They go through all the data stuff there, so. Pretty good.
Anything else? Anyone? Thank you for doing that exercise, and hopefully we'll continue to follow it and make it work for all of us. Comments from citizens? No one's here. I assume nothing. That takes us to a closed session. So in accordance with Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Pren 1, Pren C, administrator and confidential support, staff evaluation and compensation and discussion, potential action.
So moved.
Second.
So we'll need to take a roll call vote for this one. So we'll start with Jane. You have to say yes if you approve going into closed session.
Okay, yes.
Bren,
Yes.
Jeannie,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes.
Stacy,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So we're now going to move into closed session. Back in open session now, so I would,
Jackie?
we're back open. Thank you, Brian, for checking. I hear the microphone now, so I can tell. I would seek a motion for our discussion on individual administrator contracts and confidential support.
I move to approve the recommended salary increases of administrative, confidential support, paraprofessional, food service, and custodial employee groups as presented.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes 7-0. As that concludes all of our business on our agenda tonight, I'd seek a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight.